Today we're going to begin our series. Also, hopefully you grabbed from that table a copy of this book. Some of you were here in July. Mr. Christopher West came and spoke about chastity and the Catholic teaching. And so what we're doing here at Donuts and Dogma is we're having, potluck in Dogma. We're having a series. And so we are blessed today to have Coach Eddie Cerderais, who's the Director of Athletics here at St. Michael's Catholic School. He's going to do our first presentation on John Paul II and a summary of his theology of the body. Let's give Coach Eddie Cerderais a round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Bell, for those kind words. The context, I don't have my context. The context of my presentation is based on the fact that what Pope Benedict always said. All us Catholics has three tasks. One is to praise God. Two is to deal with the poor. And number three is to evangelize. My field evangelization, we all have a field evangelization. We're all called to evangelize. My field has always been the field of the youth. So within that context, that's how I can present theology of the body. With all my years of experience dealing with youth, especially at the high school level, I always find there is a lack of identity, a lack of who they are, a lack of meaning in their life. So that is why when I talk about or present theology of the body, I always present it within the scope of anthropology, theological anthropology. It's not that I don't mention the human sexuality as related to created man and woman. That's important, but I think what we're missing, especially in the youth, is that first of identity. If we don't know who we are, then obviously we don't know how to react with each other. So that's really the bulk of my talk. This is my three objectives. I'm okay like that, or I need a microphone?
Yeah, somebody else is
These are my three objectives I hope to cover. And if you look at the first one, we had a crisis of anthropology. What is that crisis? We actually separate the body from the soul. We are totally distracting them, and it's supposed to be a unity of the body and the soul. So that understanding will be extremely important, which relates to a lot of the problems that we have today. And the second part is how to reclaim that. How do we as educators can reclaim that body? The second part is the introduction to John Paul II intellectual formation and his philosophy of personalism. As it relates to the church, it's more important for us as it relates to education. Now, this is a new concept, and the reason why I bring it up because at the end of the day, theology of the body is formulated around that concept of personalism that really came from St. John of the Cross. So personalism, although it can be a very controversial topic, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, but that is really the body in which the whole pieces, I would say, in which the whole theology of the body was formulated. And the last part, which we don't have time, is okay, is basically on the creation of man from that beginning through the eyes of the second chapter of Genesis. Now, why do I mention the second chapter of Genesis? Because there is a difference between 1 and 2. 1 deals with the complete creation of God, man and woman, and the plan of God for salvation. The first part deals more with the introduction of the man itself, the awareness of the man, the self-knowledge of man, and all these attributes that leads men to recognize that he has a problem. How I ought to live is claimed as a consequences to the metaphysical question, what am I? It's not what I want, it's what am I? And that's key in today's evangelization of the youth. John Paul II main purpose for theology of the body is to present an integral vision, a complete vision of man by defending his house and meaning of the body. or the entire thesis of theology of the body is related to one concept, the spousal meaning of the body, which means the power of the body to express love. And within that love, you become a gift. And that gift is what we call the centerpiece, the heart of the thesis. Now, that concept goes and defends against a very, very, very enemy that we have nowadays, is that dualist mentality where we separate man from the body. One theology of the body is not. And just read there. And there's a little book out there, Dr. Gomes, is by Jason Everett. And there's some, if you don't read it all, at least read the introduction. And what this means here is something that I experienced as an educator, at least an educator in high school for many years. In beginning with the unaffiliated, this is not going to work. And it's interesting when I saw this and read this in the introduction, it has been said that the rule without relationship creates rebellion. This is true with parents and children, and especially true with the relations between God and humanity. John Paul knew that laws don't change hearts. When people view morality as a rigid list of imposed regulations, they might temporarily believe themselves out of fear, but they often abandon faith. This is paramount, as my experience in dealing with, mind you, I'm talking about Catholic institutions for 15 years. So I'm not talking about a public school system. This is one of the most powerful interpretations of the gospel message. And I got this from Bishop Barron. By the way, you will probably pick it up real fast that my intellectual formation was really informed by Bishop Barron. The time has come, and the kingdom of God is close at hand. Repent and believe the good news. Repent, the Greek word for repent means metanoia, which means meta, beyond, noia, the mind of the spirit, beyond the mind. So what Jesus is teaching his followers is to think beyond the state of your mind is. It's a way of knowing. It's a way of seeing. So it doesn't have that moral overtone of repent has when translated into the English language. So this is very refreshing when I bring this to our students because it brings them a little bit of a, there is hope for me too. Like I said, rules do not do well with the youngsters, with the youth. How I teach theology of the body is in my book. G.K. Chesterton introduced me to paradox. And Barron pretty much put structure to it. So when you're talking about when we talk about theology of the body, we're talking about a whole field of opposites, of all opposites coming together in unity. And those fields are a man and a woman. That opposite is unity versus solitude versus unity. Act of knowing versus the act of law, or the act of divine. Another factor is perfectly in line with this teaching, spiritual marriage and carnal marriage. So the list go on and on and on. And all these paradoxes flow from the supreme paradox, which is the incarnation, Jesus Christ. So it's important to us, at least in my experience, to introduce paradox to kids right away. It makes them think. It makes them be aware of they're not following a guideline. We are created to think. We are created to act with that thinking. So in that context, paradox is very, very useful. And in fact, it's been very useful in my years of experience with kids. I have, in back days, I used to have kids in my track and field team at the end of practice speaking in paradoxes. So there is a entry level in which we have to introduce the thinking mode of the young people today. And honestly, there's no better area that explain paradoxes in creation, in the cosmic view. We're dealing with opposite, positive and negative. We're dealing with different forces. We're dealing bonding together, the bonding of hydrogen and oxygen. All these constitute in their mind that we are meant for relationship. So that cosmic view in science is very important to Jerusalem. Okay, metaphysics, we do have today, and this is at the heart of my talk, we do have a metaphysics crisis that leads to an intellectual crisis that has led to a loss of objective truth. And what I spoke in the beginning, a loss of identity. The great writer T.S. Eliot in the mid-1900s, we do have a poverty of metaphysics. The great Fulton Sheen in the 1940s says, the great tragedy of our modern era is by abandoning metaphysics, we have abandoned intellectualism. Paul VI, writing in the 70s, he said, the world suffers because there is a lack of thinking. And not too long ago, about 2 months ago, Archbishop Jones, the Archbishop from Los Angeles, wrote a beautiful article, and the title of the article was Reclaiming Anthropology. So as we see over and over again, we do have a crisis. Now, how do we reclaim these crises to the youth? How do we reclaim the actual understanding of what metaphysics is? Well, we have to go to their field. Remember where they are. You cannot impose something related to something that they don't have no relation to. Now, last week, for example, I gave a talk to my middle class, and I mentioned an example of metaphysics. And I used our dear Coach Keaton here. Coach Keaton and I were talking last week. We were sitting right in that corner, and I asked Coach Keaton, Coach, what is the strength of your soccer team? And I expected him to say, my offense, my striker, my midfielder, my goalie. His answer was, my strength of my team is the culture. The culture of the team. So then I said, okay, so what is the weakness of your team?
So the second part, okay, the strength. Actually, the weakness of this team. And he said, the IQ of the game, or the IQ. Now, you don't expect that from a second Division II soccer team. You expect that from a 10 and under, a 14 and under team, or even high school. But you don't expect that from the from a Division II soccer team. So there's what he's thinking about is something beyond the X's and O's. Okay, that is an example of metaphysics. You got to relate to where they are. If their world, if their field is sports, then you use it for. If their field is entertainment, you use entertainment. Now, I'm going to give you another example with perfect, and I don't think I mentioned this. Joseph, I don't know if I mentioned this example of another metaphysical field there. Is that about 4 years ago, I had the privilege to go to the National Catholic High School Conference in Kansas, and in that conference, the keynote speaker was Jim Harbaugh. I'm sure you know what Jim Harbaugh is. Jim Harbaugh is the head coach for the Michigan Wolverine. As you know, he's been in the news lately, especially as an advocate, pro-life Catholic. And in that keynote address, he mentioned something very interesting that addressed all us educators. His coach back then in 1987, he was also playing for Michigan Wolverine. He was a quarterback. And on the day before the Rose Bowl, their team was having a conversation with both headliners. And Jim Harbaugh, asked the coach, how good is this team? How good is this team? And Bob Schembechler turned around and said, Jimmy, I don't know how good this team is. Maybe 10, 15 years from now, when you come with your wife and kids, I can tell you how good this team is. Now that's truly an enlightenment. I say that story to a lot of my runners in a classroom setting, and they pretty much were speechless. Okay, that statement by Coach Bo should be the mission statement of every single athletic program in every institution, every Catholic institution from lower grade to the upper level. Okay? So again, that is the typical understanding of what is a metaphysical example that we can express. The more stories we tell, the better we take care of this anthropological problem. What has been the driving force behind the loss of metaphysical anthropology in our society? Well, obviously, and this is where Bishop Barron, Peter Kreeft plays a huge role. Okay? Not too long ago, actually 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago in September, Bishop Barron launched a series of one series, 15 minutes video on the title was Idea Has Consequences. Idea Has Consequences. And he received literally up to date 900,000 views. And he was not expecting that because it was a 15-minute video talking literally about philosophy. Now, again today, about 6 months ago, he felt that, you know what, I need to resurface this again. So he has actually isolated every single of those four figures that he used and he's presenting in the video. So this is where our enemy is. The enemy is in that thought of that dualist mentality, dividing the body and soul, that has permeated through the last 200 or 300 years and is very alive in our culture, in politics, and education, in our church. Again, keep that in mind of that enemy. Who are the philosophers of the Enlightenment? They're all dualists. And I only can mention two of them, but there's a list, and one actually led to the other. The belief of one led to the other. Nietzsche, let's start with Nietzsche. God is dead, and we kill him. He developed that mentality of the will to power. And that pretty much led to some of the later philosophers with that idea, that mentality. Descartes, father of scientists, was scientist. The source of all knowledge is through the empirical knowledge of science. And with that mentality, obviously, we separated that soul aspect. We became pretty much a atheistic society. The human person, he called the human person is divided into two. And that two is the body, and the other part is the thinking mind. So he came with a big model, and we all know it. I think, therefore I am. And that's I am is pretty, if you look at it, it's very diabolic, representing what God answered to Moses. Kant, the father of subjectivism. Kant, in order to save that moral aspect, went too far. And he literally believed that all truth is subjective. Another big problem today is what I believe, what I feel is the truth, and that's the morality of time. And the last one is really the one who was taking over, and it's John Paul Sartre, which is the father of existentialism. And he basically reversed. He reversed our Aristotelian and Thomas understanding of essence precedes existence. He reversed it. He reversed it to what? He reversed to existence precedes essence, where you determine the nature of your reality. Now that pretty much resonates in our society today. We determine the nature of society. Now what are the consequences of this mentality? Here we go. The sexual revolution, the abortion, which is really prime here, the transgender issue. All these were a cause of a metaphysical understanding, an evil metaphysical understanding that led to what? An empirical evil. So there is a correlation how the metaphysical thought can lead to empirical evil. The Supreme Court decision in 1992, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, Justice Supreme Kennedy, which the speaking for the majority of the court, opined at the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own existence of meaning, of the universe, and the mystery of life. That comes straight from the playbook. The playbook of John Paul Sartre. And this is a ruling from the court. And he used pretty much the same philosophy as all these philosophers that I mentioned. So there is the metaphysical loss there. Supreme Court, the 2015 Supreme Court decision, Glover Phillips Hodges, with the dissociation of what a marriage is, taking away the procreative part, also became a factor based on that principle. I determine the nature of reality. And when it comes to creation, and the same thing with Francis Bacon, look at this quote here. If man endeavor to establish and extend the power and dominion of the human race itself over the universe, his ambition is without a doubt both more a wholesome and noble thing. That's Nietzsche. That's written all over Nietzsche there, the will to power. So this is the philosophy that our societies are living by. Okay, a very dualist understanding of reality. Now, I gave you right now the negative, what is called bad anthropology. How do we reverse that bad anthropology? There is no better person to introduce what true anthropology is than the angelic Dr. Thomas Aquinas. Now, I'm gonna read this, and the reason why I'm gonna read this is because Barron put it such in a poetic way, a very stylish, artistic way, in truly bringing what is meant by theological anthropology, of actually bringing that unity back of body and soul back in place. Aquinas was much more at home with the biblical idea of the unity of the person. And he was very aware of the Platonic dualism that was happening before his time. So he's very aware of this understanding, because the same problem we're having today, we were having it 2,000 years ago, well, even more. Okay? And here's Thomas. The soul is not an alien power standing over and against the body, nor an unhappy spirit imprisoned in the body. Rather, it is the form of the body. The energy that makes the body distinctively human. The whole human soul is the whole body. And also in every part of the body, just as God is present in the entire universe. The soul is the body, not contained by it, but containing it. One upshot of this unifying view is the body should be reverenced. We ought to cherish the body. Our body's substance is not from an evil principle, but from God. And therefore, we ought to cherish the body by a friendship of love. Now, Thomas' anthropology is in his biblical-based conviction that the human being is made in the image and likeness of God. It has to do with curiously infinite capacity of the mind and the will. The mind is never satisfied by any particular truth of science and philosophy. The mind wants to know the truth itself. The will is never satisfied by any particular good. It wants the good itself. In a word, both mind and will are ordered to God, to something beyond nature. And from this paradox flows much the drama and poetry of the human condition. The human being is made for ecstasy, for that journey to God. Now, if you look at that whole understanding of Thomas, basically in that small paragraph that I read, the body is mentioned 9 times. The soul is mentioned twice. And this resonates with John Paul II, where the body makes the invisible visible. And that's the message in which you have to bring our students, our youth. The body makes the invisible visible. The body is what God is, the reflection of our creation in love. Now that's pretty much takes care of the first part, the anthropology part, the crisis and the solution. Now, the second part here, and the reason why I thought I was pretty much felt that I should present this, because the entire theology of the body, John Paul II, has to do with this philosophy. And unfortunately, this philosophy itself has been put aside. And that's the philosophy of personalism, which is really a philosophy of understanding human experience based on phenomenology. Now, why is it important also to know a little more about John Paul II, this great saint? Well, if we get to know his roots, his intellectual formation, then maybe we can understand some of his writing. Also, his writing in the context that was written by other books, especially encyclicals. This gives us more clarity, more insight, and avoid confusion. So when we are presented with a philosophy, let's go back to the roots. Let's understand the roots a little better. So maybe we can have some appreciation as a whole instead of pretty much isolating something to our own understanding, our own capability. John Paul II suffered at a young age, losing all members of his family by the age of 20, while living in a very brutal regime, Nazism and communism. He studied philology. Philology is a study of language. Now keep that in mind, it's very important. He studied philology, theater, and poetry. All those three are extremely important in the life of the mind. Fourth, and every active here, including John, will appreciate that he was an athlete. Okay? He understood the beauty and the sacrifice behind being an athlete. He entered the underground seminary and was ordained priest in 1948. As a priest, he engaged heavily on pastoral side. Where did he engage in pastoral side? Not only in the classroom teaching, but in the woods, in the field, in the river. Okay, all dealing with creation. And there he was able to understand the experiences of the youth of his day, their sorrow, their joys, their concerns. He went into their field. Okay? By the way, that understanding of field is very Salesian. Okay? That's very Salesian understanding. Don Bosco at an early age, at the age of 9, he had a dream. And in that dream, God gave him the vision of the field that he was to evangelize. And that was his field, the field of dealing with pretty much disturbed kids. Okay? So that was John Paul II's field. Later, before he entered the seminary, he was introduced to St. John of the Cross. Now, everything here changed. Everything that we must see in theology of the body, as far as personalism, that philosophy of personalism, the gift of self, the spiritual marriage, all that came in with the writings in poetic form, known as the poetry. Poetic form of St. John of the Cross. So John the Cross became his mentor. So we can truly say that what was Virgil to Dante, what was Jerome to Augustine, what was St. Francis de Sales to John Bosco, what was Thomas Aquinas to Fulton Sheen and John Barron and Father Barron, John of the Cross was to John Paul II. I sometimes correlate and I call him Father Wojtyla. So if you hear me go Wojtyla and John Paul II, I usually go by, most of the time I usually go by his baptism name. Now, let me go a little further, I'll come back to the last point. Okay, how close was he to St. John of the Cross? Well, he wrote his first thesis on the faith of St. John of the Cross. And this is what he said, quote, "To him I owe so much in my spiritual formation. I came to know him in my youth, and I entered into an intimate dialogue with this master of faith, with his language and his thought." Notice the word language and his thought, culminating in the writing of my first doctoral dissertation on faith in John of the Cross. Ever since then, I have found in him a friend, a master, who has shown me the light that shines in the darkness for working always towards God. Okay, if you all know St. John of the Cross, you all know him by the dark night of the soul. Okay, and when we talk about St. John of the Cross, we always talk about Ruth, centuries of Advent. Actually, the whole understanding of the mystery of the spiritual marriage comes from the inner castle, this last floor of the castle, which is the intimate relationship with God, and it is in the form of a marriage. Another great saint who followed that concept of spiritual marriage is Catherine of Siena, which literally she had a ring that was only visible to her. So the understanding of spiritual marriage, these two saints that help you forward. Why do I bring St. John of the Cross? Another reason why I bring the cross. All students or youth need a mentor, a guide, someone they can relate to. somebody they can talk to. My mentor has always been Don Bosco, okay? And I accumulated other saints, but he's been my walk, so I can see my field. He's the one who showed me what I call this, my call to meditation. In this line of faith, John Paul wrote in one dissertation, a letter that he wrote in dedicating John of the Cross, faith is the only proximate and proximate means for communion with God. Here he relates that communion with prayer. That communion with prayer. And that was in Maestro de la Fe, which means Master of Faith. Along this line, you see John Henry Newman. Faith is reasoning of a religious mind. Now, and then we go into Thomas Merton even further. Prayer is finding that place in you where you are here and now being created by God. Okay, now what type of prayer are we looking here? We're looking from going from the prayer that we were taught and we feel called to in devotion and so on. Now the prayer that we are called to is a contemplative prayer. And that's leading into that perfect union. So we are called to move forward in prayer so we have that intimate relationship with God. And so these are the two great saints, John of the Cross, and even though Thomas Merton is not a saint, but he's definitely a great helper to all of us. Now the last point here, the last thesis the second thesis that John Paul II wrote was the nexus between traditional Thomists and philosophy of personalism. And this is my second introduction. What is personalism? Okay, that's the philosophy, and if we go back, and I don't have time to explain the entire personalism, that's not the point here. The point here is what reference this has to our body, understanding our body, how it's created by God. Personalism provides an ethical framework adequate to both the reality of God's loving relation to humanity and the phenomenon of the human person as she exists and experiences the world. Now here comes that objective and subjective, okay? Where basically we have a framework in which what Tila is working with. That framework is called God, objective truth. You cannot separate from that. But in order to go into experience, it has to correspond to that objective truth. And that's probably the problem we have today. We're trying to deviate experience through into our own liking and not coming back to the reality of what we are called for, how we were made. All this plays another series of paradoxes that I cover. And here's the field of subjectivity and objectivity, the law of knowing, which is experience, and the law of being, which is, again, the book of Genesis number 1. Who are we as a complete human person? The reality of objective thinking, experience and revelation, freedom and obedience, matter and spirit, earth and heaven. Okay, so there is a play always of opposites in union, and that union is God. That union is God. In John Paul II's words, every human action involves a particular lived experience that goes by the name ethical experience. Immediately, he puts the morality, the objective truth immediately to it. So there's no confusion. Experience has to go with morality. The awareness that I am performing a certain action, that I am as author, bring with a sense of responsibility for the moral value of that action. I then experience myself, my own person, as the efficient cause of my moral good or evil of my person. Ethical value intensifies the sense of the band that exists between the action and the person. This is really, if you look at it, that's what happened to Adam. First creation. Self-knowledge, self-awareness, self-possession. He knew by his created, by how he was created. In that moment, he had to experience all these knowledge, awareness of who he was. And by that awareness of who he was, he also understood also that he had a responsibility. And this is pretty much related to the book of John Paul II, Love and Responsibility, and the field, and the field experience. Okay? So where do we, how does help us understand that? C.S. Lewis, the great apologist, said, every human person, even the most atheist person, knows what is right and what is wrong, because it's written in our heart. Okay? And that's pretty much the meaning of what personalism, not to deviate at all from the law, the divine law. I'm not going to give an example of this. If we bring down and we try to consolidate it, reduce it to simplicity, real life needs to inform our theology. Just as our theology informs the way we interpret our experience. The perfect example of that is Marian apparitions. Okay? There's an experience there, the human experience of seeing something mystical. At the end of the day, it's pretty subjective. Very subjective. Now, what do those experiences have to inform? The church. Theology. So then the church can come back and interpret that experience. Okay? I read a book not too long ago, actually, yeah, a little 5 years ago. It is The Last Secret of Fatima. And in that book, which was written by Cardinal Bertone, which later became the secretary of the Congregation of the Dogma, the highest level of that. And Benedict, who was the prefect of the Dogma, approved that book. He actually wrote the last chapter. And in that book, Bertone was interviewing Sister Lucia. And it got a little edgy with her. You know, like questioning her experience. And she turned around and she said basically, Your Eminence, Our Lady, my job is to inform to you the experience that the lady gave me, what she told me. It is the job of the church to interpret. That's a profound statement. We always need to go back and help, and our theology, in this case, our church. Creation is a gift, and I like to talk about creation, especially here in St. Michael. If we understand, I mentioned it before, just remember something, I can make it very simple. It's a gift. At the end of the day, it's a gift. Okay? We all are created by a substance of the earth, and then God breathed His Spirit to it. Okay? That means that we are part of creation, but set apart. So we are part, but set apart. Meaning, the man is the only creature that God willed to Himself. And that's what He means by setting apart. We're part of creation that's set apart. We're special. We have pretty much His DNA. Barry says this very much. Creation means we're all connected. Okay? That's not coming from a song of the 60s. Okay? That's Catholic metaphysics. We all connected. Again, that's not a song from the 60s. That's Catholic metaphysics. Creation, to Genesis account, the yellows and the yellows, and this is pretty much where my whole thesis here is dealing with the Yahwehs, which is the second book of Vatican thing, the second book of Vatican, the second book of I forgot something. Let me go back to personalism. This is important because I said something. I don't want to. Now that I have 5 minutes, I was going to rush and come back. But let me go back to personalism. Give me an example of personalism today in the church. Okay, obviously we have a lot of confusion, and that understanding of the confusion, in my opinion, is a paradox between doctrine and pastoral. Okay, that the whole personalism mentality actually is written in second. Actually, not second. The Pastoral Constitution of Vatican II, which God says. Okay? There you see a lot of what he loved writing there, a gift of self. Okay? Where the church goes to the periphery. The church goes to a gift of self. The church has to go out there and be a gift. And that's the big paradox that we're dealing now. is doctrine versus pastoral. And that's the confusion itself there. Okay, remember about paradox. Christ is always in the middle. The second part is education. We see a big drift in education, and where personalism plays a role. Okay, where is the confusion? Well, we have the mentality of student oriented, and then we have a teacher oriented. The teacher oriented, pretty much, you can say is the objective part, and the student oriented means that's the subjective. We allow the student to be free, and so they can interpret their own experience, and that's really the drift in education today. Okay, so we have, by the way, the best saint who was able to bring those two items together was Don Bosco. Don Bosco, the whole playground for Don Bosco was the experience part, that they had the freedom to express themselves. But Don Bosco had his educators very in tune with the fact of the moral part. That's why he had confession and weekly confession. He had it grounded in the truth. And that's the difference. Don Bosco had it grounded in the truth, objective truth. It's okay. It's important, actually it's important that they experience their own experience, their own action, but it has to be grounded in the truth. So now you see where personalism plays in the church and where personalism plays in education. Creation of two accounts. Let me go ahead and skip that. I only got 2 minutes here. This is the book of Genesis. This is the interpretation of the book of Genesis, the second book of Genesis. And you see God there as a athletic-looking man, flowing like a force of energy. And you see that finger there, and that's his spirit. And there he formed Adam. And their words imparts Adam the capacity of thought and action. There is where an awareness of the divine law. He imparts in Adam thought and action, an awareness of the divine law. This is where God's law is written in our hearts. Wherever we go, we know what is right and what is wrong. And you also see, actually where God is encapsulated in a form where it is the anatomy of a human brain. That resembles that God created the world through His mind and logos. Okay, this is one of the best masterpieces of arts in the Western civilization. And then the whole understanding is the communication of the soul, a seat of freedom, imagination, will. Okay, those are the faculty of the fact that we are created in the image and likeness of God. Those are embedded in our heart. This is why one thing is important to understand. This is the whole understanding of how God started his creation. The three original experiences, solitude, excellence, and unity. I'm going to go through real fast on this. The solitude is at the heart of what he loves. Personalism, the human experience, self-knowledge, self-determination, self-conscious. Self-knowledge, Adam knew that he was alone. Adam knew that he was in control of his body. Adam knew that he was created by God. Adam knew that he was not God. Adam was given the task of naming the animals. Okay? A task that pretty much given the authority, superiority of what he was supposed to do. In that case, Adam was the first scientist, the first philosopher. Adam also was given the task to cultivate the land, to till. Man is the only creature who can work. No other creature can give it work. By the way, that work mentality is before the fall. Don't confuse that as a sin of that's a punishment of the original sin. That is a gift. That is a gift. That is a task that God gave us before the fall. Work is essential. And understanding that you have to understand that. Work is essential. Now this is St. John, I'm going back now real fast, St. John of the Cross triangle. And you've probably seen this, and this is pretty much at the heart of the man and male and female, where love to give oneself, the cycle of love, that proceeds to the spousal love that we talk about. And that is really the unity between the spiritual, the spiritual and the carnal marriage there. And that gift is a gift, it's a complete model. That's the model of unity, marriage, the model. That's the ultimate understanding of getting yourself total. Okay? Now, there's a third transcendent third there. And that's the triune of the Trinity. And that's the paradox where basically God is in the middle there. Okay? That marriage cannot work unless God is there in the middle. And that transcendent third is very important that you attach it to that spousal love. Very, very important. And that's something that you should understand. Okay? And we're almost there. And this is, if you look at it here, this is the fall. And then obviously this is what happens when you lose your unity with God. You see how beautiful Adam was, and look, all of a sudden their body was changed to a very animalistic view there. And if you see Eve there, that is the sin of fear that we all have. That's your ego. That is your ego. Yes, there is issue there of guilt and feel ashamed and all that. But the reality is, if you look at it, that's the beginning of the ego. Where basically we fall into our own cocoon, narrow. And that's what the sin is all about, fear. And I stop here. This is the last slide. Can I continue or not? What is sex? I'll let this for last. I'm going to bring Peter Kraft here. Peter Kraft says sex has been trivialized as something that we do instead of an inner quality of being. Okay? Sex is defined by the creation. God made male and female. Sex is something that we are, it's not what we do. With that understanding, then we can understand procreation. Procreation simply means we are cooperating with God. Man cannot create by himself. Only the closer we can come is by procreation. And that procreation requires a cooperation with God. He creates the soul at the moment the human being creates the body. And there is a unity right away. So we are procreating with God. That's why the actual sex that's why sex is holy. It's a great understanding why sex is holy. What is love? Love is the most intelligible word there is. Love is the most intelligible word there is. Love is what God is. Aquinas, love is to will the good of the other as other. And that transcendent other has to be God first. Okay? My dear friend, I keep repeating him, said John Bosco, he said to his educator, it's not enough to love the boys, but that they know they're loved. It's not enough you love them, but that they know they're loved. We all have vocations. Okay? We all have different vocations, but there's only one vocation that we all have. And that's the vocation to love. Thank you.